Okay, we're gonna go live in 5, 4,
Yeah, last bit.
2, and 1.
Should have captured the moment.
All right, we're live. I think that bit may have been captured, but alas, everything is captured in this world.
Okay, not in Parliament.
So,
Exactly.
no in Parliament. Okay, so thanks everyone for attending this Chevening Alumni Malaysia Camp Youth Forum 2020. I'll give a background to Camp Chevening Alumni Malaysia, and then we'll jump into the session, which will be moderated by Zhan. So I have a PowerPoint to share. So as you all know, this is Chevening Alumni Malaysia. We are known as CAM, not CHAM. You can also call us CHAM, but it's not very sexy. For Chevening Scholarship, I mean, the three of you have some level of exposure to Chevening anyways. It's a master's program, by the UK government, administered by the UK government. The Chevening Scholarship was established in 1983, and it was initiated in Malaysia in 1984. Malaysia, for information, is the second largest recipient of the scholarship in Southeast Asia after Indonesia, and actually we have among the highest scholarship per capita in the world. So that we usually have about 40 scholarships every year. At one point, even as high as 51 scholarships, partly because it's supported by corporate Malaysia and the government. For the knowledge of the audience that are tuning in, the scholarship for next year, between 2021 and 2022, the 2021 scholarship will be open in September next year. So check out the link. Also, you can Google Chevening Malaysia. Now, about us, right? CAM. We are an NGO, 21 years old. We have over 190 members from all backgrounds. So we have a wide range of members. We were actually in 2000s and early 2010s on many issues. We invited a lot of speakers from opposition, from NGOs, from government, and in the Chevening alumni community, we actually have a strong reputation for global and regional reputation for capacity building. We're actually pretty well renowned in the Chevening alumni community globally. I think we're pretty proud because we raised the Malaysian flag very high, and we have a very high standard when it comes to doing events and engaging with our Cheveners. You can see from the pictures, these are the past programs that we used to do. Public forums with various ministers and CEOs and NGO leaders on various topics. We have social events, Cheveners from across the world. So all in all, 23 events for the past many years. Programs for the past 21 years, using the Chevening alumni platform to nurture leaders to contribute to nation building. We do the 3 Cs. So the objective for us is to nurture leaders, and we do it through the 3 Cs: connect, continue, and contribute through various initiatives. I'll run through some of the projects that we do currently. We have a Chevening alumni leadership series for the Cheveners. We host, but I think we probably can let join. We definitely join our events, one way or another.
Right? What happened? Is it just me, or is there something wrong with Zhan's connection?
Connection is really bad. Maybe Zhan, I don't know if you want to take over.
Yeah.
Okay.
He just froze, so I don't know whether he will get his connection back.
Yeah. Someone can take over.
Is it okay now? Okay, is it okay?
Yeah.
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I think I'm sorry, the connection in Malaysia, alas, is sometimes good, sometimes not, right? It's like Malaysian politics. So this is the committee in Malaysia. Okay. So the committee for CAM, wide range of people from different backgrounds and all that. So we're very multiracial, multi-religious, multi-everything. Slide. Not Chevener, it's fine. Follow us on social media. And if you have questions, email us. Okay, so I'm ending it with this is the tagline for CAM. Yes, we CAM. Simply because I think for Cheveners in Malaysia, I think contribute back to society and do the best for our country.
Yes.
So all right. So on my side, it's better. Let's get the conversation going. Very good evening to all the live viewers we have today. Welcome to the Chevening Alumni Youth Forum. My name is John Chien, and it's my privilege to moderate this session and share this important moment with you. Our topic today, youth in Malaysian politics, incremental or transformational change. So in the first half, we will explore a topic through the lens of politics, gender, and economics. And in the second half, we will conduct a Q&A, involving you, the viewers actually, in a mix of questions submitted through the registration form and also live. So be sure to engage fully as we'll try to gain as much coverage as possible. So without any delay, let's introduce our esteemed speaker for today. Our first speaker is a vocal public figure. He's an LSE graduate under the Chevening Scholarship, an ex-management consultant who's also an active columnist to outlets such as the New Straits Times, the defender of the largest national political party in Malaysia, UMNO Information Chief and Deputy Youth Chief, Mr. Shahril Hamdan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Our second speaker, the champion of social causes, the recipient of Women's of the Future Awards by the UK-based organization due to her work in citizens' education and empowerment on the Malaysian Constitution and human rights, the Chief Human Rights Strategist at the Malaysian Center of Constitutionalism and Human Rights, MCCHR, Ms. Firdaus Husni. Welcome to the forum.
Thanks, John.
Yeah. Last but not least, our final speaker is the reason why many of you are tuned in today. You know him as the youngest serving minister and the youngest to take office at the age of 25. A scholar, activist, Instagram extraordinaire, and less than 4 months ago, he co-founded the Malaysian United Democratic Alliance, MUDA, which I'm sure we'll learn more about it tonight. Please welcome YB Syed Saddiq.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's jump right into it with our first question. What are the challenges you face as a young political leader, especially coming from the budget vote tonight?
Yeah, I mean, the budget vote is a separate issue, but as a young leader, there will definitely be those who will seek to delegitimize youth leadership because of one's inexperience. You are automatically seen to be subpar, suboptimal, substandard. However, I think the best way to answer to questions of one's experience or inexperience is to prove them wrong through our success, to show that one's youthfulness in no way should be treated as a liability, but instead should be treated as an asset. That young people are disruptors, they dare to think critically out of the box, they are able to come up with unconventional solutions to resolve conventional problems, that we are a lot more idealistic, and idealism should no way be treated as a weakness, but as an asset, because it keeps us passionate, it keeps us motivated, it allows us to move forward. So while some may think that our inexperience will drag us down, I think it actually allows us to move forward a lot faster. So in Parliament, in many occasions, as you have seen, these things happen. However, I think the public overall is mature enough to differentiate right and wrong, and therefore will assess us based on our merit, on our skills, on what we can deliver, instead of looking at experience only.
Okay, so Shahril, following up on the point of delegitimizing your opinion, have you felt that in your platform, Shahril?
In a word, yes. I think wherever you find yourself in the political system, we can only speak with great confidence about Malaysia, but presumably this happens elsewhere as well. There will be people always trying to put you down, and there will be a risk of voices trying to delegitimize or make it seem like your views matter less due to your age. So that's just, I suppose, the terrain that we're faced with. And the thing about age, though, is it's different from other kinds of, if you want to use the word discrimination, or other kinds of categorization, like ethnicity or like gender, because age is something that everyone goes through. So even people who might speak down on young people will always have the claim that I was young once. So it's less offensive off the bat, right? But it's no less harmful because, as all of us, I imagine, agree, there are generation-specific viewpoints and generation-specific worldviews which ought to be represented across all key political decision-making. And this will be true for young people. This will be true for elderly people as well. This will be true for any generation. You want a situation where all generations are represented, because there is something to be said about one's experience based on the generation that he or she is born into and the specific circumstance, right? So just purely from that score, why this idea of youth representation and empowerment and all the rest of it is an issue is because it's quite clear. The statistics are quite clear that the youth voice is underrepresented in many areas. So I think that's why we're talking about
this. I want to further explore that, right? So if I may, Firdaus, mention about age. Is age discrimination a consideration under the MCCHR, and what sort of work has been done? Is it classified under as a discrimination?
Well, when one is being ageist, that's what we call it, is when one's input or contribution is invalidated or delegitimized based on one's age, and it's considered, I makan garam lebih daripada you. That is essentially the sentiment behind it. So this is something that we recognize, and that is why one of the main components at MCCHR is to work on youth education and empowerment, because youth today, and this is due to the advent of IT, information technology, they are aware information is readily accessible, but they may not have the tool. And I don't know whether the structure that we have today supports the need to provide them with that tool as to how they can use that information to contribute to the society. They can, only if we allow them to, and at the moment, I don't think we have the correct structure for that.
Okay, so you point out a deficiency in the tools that's available for the youth to access, right? Can I also go back to Saddiq? From the government standpoint, how are we addressing the lack of tools, access to maybe participate in politics, or to be fully aware of what's happening? How, from a government standpoint, how are you approaching it?
You're muted.
Yep, thanks, Shahril. I can't speak on behalf of the government because I'm no longer part of government. But what I can share is the experience before. I think the point in which we reduced the voting age to 18 years old, which will bring in more than 7.8 million new young voters, that will change the political landscape by youthifying it, where all political parties will have to be brave enough to field more young candidates, whether on the federal or state level, and at the same time to push up more young candidates within party ranks, because they know that in elections to come, young people will become the kingmakers. The second part, in terms of preparing institutions to be more favorable to young people, I like to share what Sina Harian did. I remember during last election, money has always been an issue for youth participation in politics, because running an election is very costly. It can go up to more than 200,000 ringgit. And especially if you are to contest in a suburban or rural seat, it becomes even tougher. Before last election, I met up with a few businessmen to push for a common fund, a bipartisan fund, to assist and support all youth candidates below 30 years old. And it doesn't matter which party you come from, if you're below 30, you can access this fund. Sina Harian took up this cause. Obviously, they are anonymous donors who donated, which in the end led to all youth candidates below 30 receiving funding of about 10 to 20,000 ringgit, which is a decent amount. On top of that, I think a one-page cover exclusively from Sina Harian, online coverage from Sina Harian, printing of banners and buntings by Sina Harian. So I think that's a brilliant initiative which should be continued to ensure that we get to equalize the playing field, even though not in a perfect sense, but at least to some extent. I think that's in terms of money. But the most important part, I think in the end, is that there must be political will to push for more young candidates, to bring more young people in, and often it must come from top leadership. I remember when I co-founded Bersatu at 23, I was lucky enough because the leaders, both to Dr. Badi and now Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, allowed me to become one of the co-founders and then to lead a youth wing. But it wasn't just about me. Then to ensure that Bersatu nominated the very first youth representative in the Presidential Council of Pakatan Harapan. And then from there onward, using our voice to bring up a lot more young people, to set a quota for youth representatives to be appointed as Ahli Majlis, as Exco, as ministers, and to ensure that there are enough young people pushed up as the board of GLCs and many others. The point is you need to use your voice to push a lot more young people forward.
Okay, you mentioned a good part about economics, and I'm sure we'll circle back to that topic later on. Can I ask Shahril on youth? How has UMNO adapted and increases its appeal to young people to join the platform?
Yeah, I was asked the same or very similar question in another forum last week. I think one is to understand that young people seems like an obvious point to make, but ought to be made anyway. Young people are diverse, and you're talking about Malaysian young people. It's not homogeneous. Without saying it explicitly, I'm guessing we have a sense on platforms like this, speaking in English, what we mean by young people. This is Chevening, this is that feel, right? It's that vibe, it's that treatment. But the truth of the matter is, young people in Malaysia is a huge group that is also very different in terms of their political beliefs, leanings, and what appeals to them. There are certain things that cut across, but there are certain things that don't. The reason for this long intro to that question is because I think it's important to note that parties like UMNO will always have a traditional base, and that cuts across ages. It's not just the reputation it might have in the Twitter crowd and the Bangsa bubble that is for older people or is of a certain kind of generation. That's not entirely true. That's why we have many hundreds of thousands of members in UMNO Youth, and slightly fewer number in Putri. So that's a significant number of our membership. Over 3 million is young, or at least defined under 40. How we do moving forward in terms of appealing to the younger generation is to change the face of the party, or rather evolve make sure there's an evolution in the face of the party, so that there are more young people that can represent the party, can be spokespeople.
Okay. By putting more youth on the display.
If I can just add, John, just a bit more. But beyond just the faces, it's also about the issues that we speak about. So, for example, I personally am trying to push for certain policies which I feel are more directly relevant to young people because of my age. UMNO has been, over the past month or month and a half, very clear that its main agenda for the short-term moment, especially lead up to the budget third vote, about EPF and moratorium. Whatever I feel about those things, and that's a party position, and therefore I'm in support of it. I don't think there's I have certain views about it, but in short, I think it's good for the people and the targeted folks that we're trying to help. But the truth of the matter is, most young people don't have EPF, right? Or they don't have any real EPF savings to speak of. So that's where I also try and add a different dimension to the UMNO pressure, the UMNO voice. We also speak about jobs, speak about training for young people, retraining. How do we help the youth unemployed? So that's also another part of the way we can appeal to young people, so that we don't simply.
How did you feel about that process of proposing those policy to your platform? Has it been smooth? Has it been welcoming?
There are some challenges because in a party like UMNO, sometimes once one or two issues have dominated the landscape, they really dominate the landscape. So it becomes EPF and moratorium, EPF and moratorium. When in fact, even members of parliament, all the members of parliament from UMNO were speaking about a range of other things, including how we help students in universities, but that didn't get the airtime, that didn't get the buzz. So that's a challenge, and also a reflection of one's, I suppose, political reach, which in my case can always be improved.
All right, we'll put a hold on the political, and I would like to segue to our next angle. But before we do that, let's get to know our panel a bit more. So what's maybe starting with Firdaus, what's your favorite food?
Wow, what's my
Before
favorite
we segue
food?
to our next topic.
There's a whole range. I'm into Korean food these days. But there's a
Korean.
lot of, yeah. But it's a good variety, a good mix of what I like. So I can't really pinpoint one.
All right. How about Syed Saddiq?
I love my nasi lemak. At the same time, it will never beat my mom's lasagna. So lasagna is definitely at the top of the list. My mom's lasagna specifically. So yeah.
All right, Shahril?
Tom yum. If I had to pick one, is tom yum. Like it could be bihun tom yum, it could be tom yum with rice and telur dadah, it could be tom yum and ikan kembung, but tom yum is a big thing for me.
It's great. Different flavors. Everyone, we have a diversity of views and diversity of interests. So let's continue. For those who just tune in, this is the Chevening Youth Forum. We cover youth politics, and we want to move on to an important topic, which is women empowerment. To set some context for you, women are taking the stage, leadership positions around the world. So for example, New Zealand, United States, Finland, and counting, right? Whereas progress in Malaysia has been checkered. For example, women in cabinet has dropped to 13% under PN from PH 18. I don't know the exact figure right now, but it is an alarming figure. Firdaus, we'd like to start the discussion with you. Why do you think the figure is so low, and how do we get more women involved?
Thanks. Very quickly, as to how we at MCCHR approach or look at this issue, first point of reference or main point of reference for us would be the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, where at Article 7 it says that state party shall take all measures to eliminate discrimination against women in political and public life, and in particular ensuring that women are on equal terms with men in terms of, for example, elections, putting their name up for elections, formulating, implementing government policies, taking up public office, carrying out public functions. So these are some of the examples. And why I mentioned CAPF is because Malaysia is a party to CAPF since 1995. So the question here would be, why aren't we implementing? Why are we as a state party isn't implementing this when we are a state party to CAPF? The answer to that actually warrants a forum on its own, but I will try to make it short. One would be our resistance to change the status quo. Like it or not, it's a patriarchal system when we look at our structure of governance. And what is that? It's essentially a system that is dominated and supports men. And therefore, in that system, the man is seen as the comparator as to what is an acceptable standard. And so therefore, anything less than that is considered not achieving the standard. So, and you have also, in our culture, have this notion of father figure. I remember very quickly last time when I was in the UK, I wanted to do some public engagement with the Malaysian community in the UK. And I remember being told that, look, Firdaus, unless you are a man with preferably some religious credential, they would not want to listen to you. So that person will apologize to me afterward. But you know what? That truth is the honest truth. sadly speaking, and the reality of our society today, doesn't matter where they are residing. So that's one. And then next thing would be the unhelpful framing of the conversation. Whenever someone advocates about equality, gender equality, it is quite immediately seen as a man versus woman debate, when it shouldn't be. When you are merely advocating for women's equality, for women's right, it does not equate to a denial of the right of the men. And if you frame it that way, then really you're going to cut off the conversation from the get-go. And the point here is that you cannot make that comparison when there is unequal access to the opportunity, and in this context, in public and political life, for women to be able to have equal access to that opportunity in the first place. If there is unequal access, don't talk about that comparison, because to me that makes no sense. And we also hear those who talk about what do you call that? Well, women today can vote, women today can work. So what's the big deal? What are you guys making noise about? And that's another thing. When we talk about equality, it should not be on the account of only formal equality. It should be on the account of substantive equality, in the sense that yes, women can vote, women can now work as compared to during our forefathers' time. But what about hidden barriers that stops women from meaningfully engage in public and political life? Two examples of hidden barriers. Society's expectation is usually the woman who's expected to take care of the house, the children, their parents, their in-laws. So that, and then another one would be sexual harassment. Yes, I'm not going to discredit that men can also be the victim here, but when we look at the figures, it's overwhelmingly women who are the survivors, the victims. Yeah, and that is why it's important to push for sexual harassment bill to be passed. That's one of it. That's one way how Malaysia as a state party can help eliminate these hidden barriers. Very quickly, I remember when last time when I was practicing as a lawyer, somebody came to me asking me for advice. They says that she was a nurse in a hospital, and she was being stalked. And so the advice that they wanted me to give is like, what is it that the nurse can do? So after a while, I didn't hear much from them. By the way, the harasser is apparently a very well connected guy, and so later I found out that the woman decided to quit her job. And to me, it's infuriating to know that the woman who's being harassed has to be the one who has to change her life, change her job, while the one who did the harassment just continue with his life as though nothing happened. And so these
the victim blaming, yes, yeah. Patriarchy.
Thanks.
Right. So very insightful sharing on that. So it seems that patriarchy is a lot more deep-rooted, and it requires a legislative signal. So can I circle to Syed Saddiq? Tell us about MUDA and how does it recognize patriarchy and how does it react to them?
How does it recognize patriarchy? I hope we don't. And we must challenge it and confront it. I think first thing first is to ensure that we have a lot more women in leadership positions. So it's not just about limiting their roles and influence to a woman's wing, but we should also have vice presidents, even in the future presidents of political parties who are led by women. Look at PKR for an example. When Datuk Sri Anwar was in prison, it was Datuk Sri Wan Aziza who navigated the party forward and was able to become the uniting force. And I had the privilege of working under Datuk Sri Wan Aziza, being part of the cabinet. And despite what people say about her, she's amazing in terms of really pursuing the politics of compassion and wanting to genuinely serve and focus on the right and not wanting to meddle in the dirty politics and divisive politics. So I think taking experience working with her and also being a part of the SATU before, when we set up MUDA, one, we don't want the roles of women to be limited in respective wings. That's why when when, and I hopefully soon, our party gets registered, you'll see a lot of women in top positions, not just as Supreme Council members, but even in the highest positions of the party. We also want to ensure that we create a hospitable environment, an environment in which doesn't silence the ability of women to speak up by recognizing their roles even more. Beyond that, I think entering elections, I think parties should not just compete with one another on who could field more youth candidates, but also to field more female candidates. Malaysia Parliament is largely dominated by men. The number is below 15% if you look at women overall, which is abysmal. Hopefully, if MUDA wants to become a true disruptive political force, it must break that tradition. It cannot just be about 10, 15%. It should ideally should be higher than 30%. And also to, if we are to win, to field a lot more women in top positions, whether in government companies or in the ministry, so that in the end, in every single decision-making process, not only will you have a young person there, but you also have equitable representation among gender to ensure that their views will never be sidelined. And I think acknowledging what Datuk Sri Aziza has done, hopefully we can create a lot more success stories like that.
All right, that's quite inspirational, right? I want to highlight a statistic. So in 2018, a total of 57% of unemployed graduates were female compared to 43% male, right? We expect this disparity to worsen in 2021 onwards. So unless there are clear legislative signals to improve, Shahril, maybe I want to ask you this. How's UMNO as a platform seeing this disparity, and what are the policy recommendations would you share with us from your platform?
Which specific disparity again?
So we are seeing a higher number of unemployed graduates who are female compared to 43% male who were unemployed graduates. So from your platform, how can it address this issue?
Yeah. So this is a policy question, right? Just off the top of my head, off the top of my head, I think one, we need to address the reasons as to why you have this disparity. Without having the stats right next to me, I think I've read elsewhere though. That has got to do with discrimination, whether straight away out of university. It could be, it's also contributed by discrimination because there's an assumption, or rather a prejudice, that young women want to get married and therefore become mothers, and there is an expectation, again a prejudice more like, that they will be out of work for a period of time, and that counts against them. Oftentimes you hear anecdotes of interviewers at the workplace, asking if you're going to get married soon, how many kids do you already have, are you planning to get pregnant soon? These are anecdotes that often induce cringing on anyone who is half aware of sensibilities that ought to be the norm in 21st century Malaysia, right? So those are the reasons that I think we should be looking at, and therefore what kind of legislation can be made for this kind of.
Is there a policy in the pipeline that you can share with us?
Well, that would be a policy that definitely I would fight for. That would be a policy that I think if I was in a position of more influence, such as being in the house that Saddiq is in, then you will hear more from UMNO representatives. But I think also just to quickly add to the points that both other speakers have mentioned, I think in the case of women in politics, because I didn't get to address that part, UMNO also has to do more. If I can speak for my own party, has to do more. We have a wing. We have two wings, right? Putri for younger females and Wanita. It's a double-edged sword. One, it allows an it allows for the flourishing of female activity in politics in my party. But as I think was trying to be implied by Saddiq, it almost the other edge of the sword is that you can get comfortable in that wing, if I can just put it that way, or rather you sometimes inadvertently get pigeonholed in that. So that's why we've not seen a female UMNO vice president or deputy president, or so that is something that I personally like to see change. Having said that, we've had in our history and even in the current times, very prominent female politicians from UMNO. The current one that I can, apart from our Ketua Wanita, who's the Minister of Higher Education, the Deputy Speaker, Datuk Sri Azalina, is very unapologetic and very clear about what she feels about women's empowerment and women's rights in the party and outside. So that's also one example that we can be proud of. So there's definitely steps to be made about the party structure and how we facilitate more female leadership in those key positions, not just stay in Wanita.
All right. Okay. Very insightful conversation on gender indeed. We should move on to discuss the impact topic that is in the interest of viewers' mind, economy and employment. So again, before we do that, let's ask some non-work-related questions. Firdaus, what's your favorite music artist? What's on your podcast lately?
Well, I haven't been able to listen to BFM live, and so I've been catching up on their podcast. And I've also been one of the particular slot, which is Law and Behold. That's the slot that I'm working together with the producer to try to come up with a constitutional topic that contemporary issue, and that can be related to everyone or everyone's understanding. So yeah, so that's one podcast.
All right, Law and Behold, check it out. Syed Saddiq, your favorite music and what podcast should we listen to?
My answer is a lot more or less intelligent than what Firdaus mentioned, but I'll just be frank and honest. I've been listening to a lot of house music, mixture of pop and R&B. I'm listening to house music not because clubs are closed now, but it psychs me up whenever I go jogging in the morning or when I come back from work. So yeah, I mean, despite the fact that house music, less of lyrics but more of the rhythm, but I truly enjoy it. In terms of podcasts, same thing. I always weekly will download the Economist audio version, and then I'll listen to it as many times as possible. Yeah.
All right, Economist and house. Shahril?
Yeah, I sometimes feel I should have been born in the 60s, because that's the genre that I enjoy the most. So the music I listen to now, as I've always listened to, is people like, if I had to pick one, is Bob Dylan. So that's really my all-time favorite artist. In terms of podcasts, I listen to a lot of the Guardian podcast, but one I want to give a shout out on is this by BBC called Grounded with Louis Theroux. So Louis Theroux is this journalist that some of you might know, and writer and film producer, documentary producer. He recently started this podcast series in which he interviews celebrities and people of note and has really deep conversations with them. So you've got people like, gosh, for the life of me, can't remember her name. The one who had that, one of the most vocal accusers of that crazy Hollywood rapist. His name escapes me. The big guy.
Sorry, I lost a...
Harvey Weinstein, is it?
Yeah. What was her name? The Rose McGowan.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so imagine that a conversation about her experience, which was obviously very harrowing, and he got into a really deep place with her in that conversation. So he's got a series of conversations with folks like that, and very touching and very enlightening.
All right, thank you. So Bob Dylan, and the podcast is called Grounded, right?
Grounded with Louis Theroux. if I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
All right, check it out. So let's go to our final topic before the Q&A. This is very real and felt across old and young, especially with the COVID backdrop. On economy, Shahril will give you the first question. How do we address deficiencies, skills mismatch, low quality jobs faced by youth today? So how do we address that?
Was that for me? Your voice was breaking up.
Yeah.
For me, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How we address skills
Shahril,
mismatch?
this for you. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's the standard answer, which I'll go very quickly because I think everyone's heard a version of it. It's about employers getting involved in universities, meaning the syllabus, meaning the partnership between education providers and employers getting better, all the rest of it, right? So that is, I think, a theme that you will hear and you will have heard a lot. And I think there's a lot of truth in it. Oftentimes, graduates come out of universities with a skill set that is ill-equipped to meet the expectations of the employer. So clearly there's something wrong in the chain there somehow or somewhere. And therefore, education to employment, end-to-end view will help a lot. So there's that intervention.
Okay.
That has to be done.
Okay.
That will have continuously be done. But I think we also have to face the possibility, the probability, in fact, that employers' needs and requirements, the industry's needs and requirements are so ever-changing that there is a limitation to that approach. So I want to be very careful here. I'm not knocking the approach. I think the approach is key, and there's a space for that. But there is also, in my opinion, a huge role that government can do to provide directly jobs for people. So this is what I've been speaking about in more recent times, called the job guarantee, a federal job guarantee, in which the federal government basically funds and creates certain jobs that the private sector does not create or that does not offer. So these are jobs that serve not just profits, but actually serve a social interest. These are things that can also enhance, therefore, the quality of life in society. How it's going to be done is a long-winded answer, which I will not get into. But I feel that we need to shift our discussion towards also achieving zero unemployment. And achieving zero unemployment, in my opinion, can only be done if there is a buffer stock of employment opportunities provided by the government. I say in my opinion, it's not really an original opinion by any stretch. There's a lot of literature on it already. It's just a viewpoint that isn't mainstream yet, and it's something that I hope will become mainstream in the years to come. I feel that's really key.
Zero employment governance.
Zero employment, not zero employment.
Okay, zero unemployment. Right.
Correct.
Okay. So governments and businesses talk about future-proofing our workforce, right? I will direct this question to Syed Saddiq. Can everyone really be reskill, upskill, and cross-skill themselves? Is it realistic?
I think one way or another we have to, because if we don't, then when industries get disrupted, we will often be left without a job, or due to the skills mismatch, in the end, we will be underemployed. We have degrees, we have masters, but we are forced to work in the low-end sector of the gig economy. So I think there are a few key things which we have to do to move forward. One is, I think there should be a greater stress on investing in TVET. The fact that in Malaysia, TVET is still seen as a low-end sector in which doesn't pay well, to me is highly problematic. I remember when I was at the ministry, we got a much higher budget for TVET, and we saw the difference. The level of employment of TVET graduates for the 22 TVET institutes under the ministry was at 96%, much higher than even some of the best universities. And as we skilled them, we matched them immediately with corporates we instituted the teaching factory concept, where we brought factories into the TVET learning institutes. So in a way, in 1 or 2 years' time, they are not just skilled, but they already have jobs and they're already paid partially when they are studying. And we saw that substantial difference. And I think just last week, the KSN, the top civil servant in Malaysia, stated that 60% of the jobs offered by the government now is for TVET graduates. Second part is to reduce reliance on foreign workers. I think this also plays a role with creating more high-income jobs and also dealing with underemployment. So let's look at one of Malaysia's best industries, which is palm oil. It's still largely labor-intensive. And I think as we face with COVID, there's a unique opportunity for us to disrupt that industry and to make it more tax-intensive and moving away from a labor-intensive industry. We witness how countries in Europe, in US, move their agricultural economy to become less labor-intensive, to tech-intensive when they face a crisis. Look at how US dealt with their sugarcane industry, which previously required a lot of labor, but now it's almost fully automated. So it requires government to give matching grants. It requires government to invest a lot more to place preconditions for industries to ensure that they can tech up and not just become another labor-intensive industry. And it's the second part.
Okay.
Third part, I think also to deal with unemployment. And to me, I think the biggest problem in Malaysia is not just unemployment, but in reality it's unemployment. Last year, without COVID, the level of unemployment in Malaysia was only about 3.2%, one of the lowest ever. However, underemployment is a big issue because people with degrees and masters are still being paid about 2,500 ringgit or 3,000 ringgit a month, which is abysmal. So obviously the easiest part or quick win is to increase minimum wage. I think that 22 months of Harapan's administration, we were able to increase minimum wage from an average of 900 ringgit to about 1,200 ringgit, which is a decent increase. I think it should be increased a lot more. Besides that, it's also about investing in more into creating more high-income jobs, whether it's in the green economy, which again, if I'm to substantiate, will take a very long time. But I think in the beginning, at least government, or at least under Harapan, were able to secure a 6.5 billion job stimulus package, where government will create an income top-up to help industries gravitate from, to transition from a labor-intensive workforce to become less labor-intensive, and at the same time to provide more jobs. For example, if you, let's take a simplest example, if you are for garbage collectors in Penang, there's a very unique example in one of their daerahs. Previously, they largely only employ foreigners because again, these are 3D jobs. But when incomes are very low, that's when locals do not go there. However, when they increase, when they start to automate and at the same time have more Malaysians work in the industry, but with a higher pay, the Penang government did subsidize that income top up. However, that meant creating a lot more jobs for locals at a better salary scale, which in the end, not just allowed for automation, but also create decent jobs or dignified jobs for fellow Malaysians. So it can be done. It just requires greater political will, more investments to specific sectors. I believe it can be done if we move forward.
You mentioned a great point about foreign worker. I just want to look Firdaus in for the final question. So we mentioned about statistic and also hard labor, right? So the harsh condition. So at MCCHR, how does it approach to help the people in the harshest working conditions, especially with the manual labor?
Okay, thank you. This is actually a good point to raise. And it's at this juncture that I would like to highlight one of the initiative, one of the law and policy reform work that's being rolled up by MCCHR, and that would be to try to look at a possible reform on our ATIPSOM, and that is Anti-Trafficking in Person and Smuggling of Migrants Act. So at the moment, of course, when we talk about TIPSO, when we talk about trafficking, we're looking at it as a crime, a syndicate of human trafficking. But they are also an aspect that is not currently being recognized, and we are pushing it to be recognized, and that is called modern slavery. And that is one thing that we hope that the TIPSO, that act can incorporate for the recognition of modern slavery. That is one. And then second, when we look at businesses, it's not just confined to a particular country. I mean, across borders, you've seen a lot of international transactions taking place, and in fact, these businesses are sometimes have even more clout or influence as compared to governments across the world. And so, recognizing that, this is an aspect that I feel that the government should start focusing and placing more importance of, and that is the relation between business and human rights, where businesses must take responsibility in human rights. For example, they must make sure that their supply chain in terms of human resources do not support human trafficking, for example, and do not support exploitation of migrant workers, for example. Issues like, for example, holding the passport. Is that legal? Is that illegal? And what are the actions taken by it? And are they remedies or avenues for workers whose rights have been violated? Yeah, are they avenues for them to go? Do we have that? And I think that is another area in which our government must look into. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Right, a great point on modern slavery, as well as businesses complying to human rights standards throughout its supply chain. So this has been a very content-rich session. Before the Q&A, I want to give 1 minute to each speaker to tell us what's going on in your life and what would you like the viewers to take away from today's forum. Shahril, we'll start with you.
What's going on in my life?
Yeah, and what would you like the viewers to take away from today's forum? Could be anything. The floor is yours.
What do I want people to think is going on in my life? Is the question.
Oh, okay.
Joking. I'm only half joking. So apart from, I suppose, day-to-day doing the politics stuff that I do, in my case, it's quite party-specific because I wasn't elected by the people. I was merely elected in my party and appointed to another post in the party. So that takes up a lot of my time. Apart from that, for fun, just like everyone else, Netflix binging in 2020 has been a thing because of MCO. I've watched way more TV than I should. So the reading bit and stuff everyone does, but I can't deny that there was a lot of it that was spent on Netflix binging. So there's that. I recently also started playing guitar again, which I've been playing since I was 11, and I stopped for quite a few years, and therefore got a bit rusty, but picking it up again. So that's been fun. And lastly, what else do I do that's interesting, halfway interesting? I go to the gym a lot. So that takes up a bit of my
you get 16 seconds. That's a very long minute right there.
Sorry?
That's a very long minute, sir.
Yeah, okay. Just a quick one about what I want people to take from this. So apart from the frivolous stuff, is to see that people from different parties and different backgrounds, we all share a certain desire for a better country and a better future. We might go about it differently. We might quarrel and disagree on many things, but the intention is often very similar, and I'd like to think positive. And if some of us make it and get to the outcome we want for a better country, then it'll be great for all of us.
All right, thank you. YB, Syed Saddiq, we'll give you a minute.
He's got a restaurant. He used to talk about his restaurant or whatever it is that he just.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. Thank you, Shahril. 2020 has been very exciting and interesting, and yeah. So I think now I'm able to focus a lot more on my constituency more and time to myself, which also just allowed me to open my very first restaurant or business franchise, Santan. So anyone who's near Mont Kiara, please to visit. It's at Kiara 163. The unique part is I'm finally able to really deal with, even if it's a small business, but to really understand how business works. And it will be a learning experience. Hired all Malaysians, all young people, those who were retrenched by AirAsia. One of the staff is a pilot, stewardess, and really understand what I can do to move their lives forward. But besides that, which is a new venture, I spend a lot more of my time now in Muar. Back then, when I was serving in the ministry, I could only go back once a week. Now I can go back 3 to 4 times a week. If there's no parliament, I stay there a lot. And really to try new ways of politics of service. So recently, we started this new program called Satu Keluarga, Satu Laptop, where we collaborate with private sector to provide high quality laptops to families with an income of below 1,500 ringgit. And now we've distributed more than 150 laptops, good quality, and we want to reach that 500. We want to reach that 500 goal to assist 500 poor families. Next, which is in the pipeline, waiting to be executed, is to invest in those who are exceptionally young. I mean, babies, really like who's 1, 2, 3 years old, to invest in their SSPTN. So it's their education fund from young. So maybe we'll put in about 500 ringgit. Government will top up the other 500 ringgit. So in a way, then when they reach 18 years old, they already have a decent sum of money for education. And since government already subsidizes 90% of their education, if they enter IPTA, then we will try our best to cover the remaining 10% if we start investing from young. So again, it's another crowdfunding effort. Even though now in opposition, allocations have been taken away, it's tough, but again, it opens up new rooms of opportunities for me to work with private sector, for me to work with NGOs. So it can be done. Di mana ada kemahuan, di situ ada jalan. So 2 things to take away. One, if you love Malaysian food, come to Santan. Secondly, if you also love Malaysian food and you want to spend a good, have a good time, come down to Muar. Muar is amazing. The food there is amazing. People there are amazing. And I'll be more than glad to become your tour guide.
All right. Good luck to your ventures. Firdaus, we'll give you a minute.
All right, sure. So personally, and also in terms of my human rights works, personally, I've been trying to catch up on reading, and I actually thought the MCO would actually give me a chance. Well, not a chance. I actually catch up on my Korean dramas instead. So mismatched priorities there. So that's one. But second, I'm finding sleep is a luxury for me, in the sense that it has been quite stressful. And so 2 a.m. is like the earliest I can sleep. And that's frustrating because it affects your work during the day. So there's that. And second, I would say this pandemic really makes me realize about the importance or value of family. My father was having some health situation, and it was frustrating because the hospital doesn't allow visitors, and so because of that they were not prepared to issue a letter, and because of that I cannot get a permit to go back to my hometown. And so this is also a moment where I realized our freedom of movement, which we always take for granted, isn't it? So that's another thing. In terms of human rights work, I share the frustration with all of my other friends in the civil society circle. When February happened, a lot of us were in the midst of law and policy reform work. And these are not an accumulation of a couple of months' work. Some of those work are years' work. And so to have that now being put at the back burner, or rather with no indication as to where it's now going, that is where we are at, and that is where I am at actually when it comes to human rights advocacy. I hope I hope there is a positive indication moving forward after this. Hopefully, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for your work in the human rights sector. We appreciate that. All right. The Q&A. I'd like to remind our viewers that this will be a hybrid between questions from the registration form and live. So please keep the questions coming. Our committee is working really hard in the background to feed the questions to me, right? So I think with the interest of time, we'll have one speaker per question. We'll do maybe like a rapid fire to recognize the people have taken their time to ask our speaker question. So Shukri asked about the barrier of entry into politics. Without funding, youth political movement cannot be materialized. Possible for the youth. Syed Saddiq, we'll give you this one.
I think as time passes by, I mean, politics has evolved. Back then, it's very much cash intensive. Now it's getting less cash intensive. If it's all about money, I would definitely have lost my seat in more, because incumbent MP then would get about 5 million a year from the government and spend that 5 million before even halfway through the year, which is in 2018. And on top of that, get allocations from UMNO Barisan Nasional Pusat, from specific businessmen. So, and I definitely did not even have 500,000 and had to fundraise it. Did a few fundraising events here and there to even get the threshold of 200,000 ringgit. So I think it can be done, especially if you create a platform which serves the public, and there will be many people who you wouldn't expect to come to help you. They'll help you. Like for myself, again, because we don't buy voters, so it's just about getting volunteers, getting merchandisers, flags up, and then creating a good policy platform or manifesto on the local level and push that message through. So I think it's becoming less and less costly. At the same time, I think it's about, as I mentioned just now, setting up independent institutions who will be there to support all youth candidates. And Sina Harian has been great, and it has worked for the first time. I think they gave support to past candidates who are below 30. I think there was also an MCA candidate who was below 30 years old. So to all candidates below 30, so hopefully that will be great in supporting youth candidates across the aisle. But my final message to you is, even though we young people, we don't have the political connections like those who are out there, those who are much older, we don't have the financial capital like those who are much older. But as long as you have that passion and that drive and that idealism to move forward, don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm very sure there'll be many of those out there who will be willing to help out. It's just about asking for help and then creating the right platform which serves the interests of the many. And then you'll see an avalanche of support coming in from those who you least expect to support you.
All right. We have a live question here from Lo Wan Xing. How will you position or prepare Malaysia to stay competitive economically, especially against our neighboring ASEAN countries? Shahril, would you like to take this one?
Sure. How will we position Malaysia to be exactly that? One, I think we need to increase our economic capacity. So this has to go back to what was first talked about by our former Prime Minister Tun Abdullah when he talked about modal insan. And the thing about Malaysian politics is once a Prime Minister speaks of something, and once he is no longer around, it doesn't become a buzzword anymore. That's a sad reality, which I don't think should be the case. I think we should start talking about human capital again. So that is one part of the answer. There will be corollary debates about brain drain. Why do people leave the country? Is there a pro-Malay economic policy that is counterproductive? So those are all the different branches at which we can speak about. But basically, I feel we need to relook at the strategy of increasing our economic capacity via labor, via our human capital. So there's that. Two, very quickly, moving away, in my opinion, again, slightly controversial, moving away from this dependency on foreign investment. I think that worked really well in the 70s, 80s, 90s. I think one of the mindset shifts that I'd like to see Malaysia do in the next decade or so is, alongside human capital development, what can we do to invest on indigenous technology in, alongside what Saddiq mentioned just now, indigenous technology, indigenous capacity, where we don't rely and we don't get super excited on FDI going up or down. Because once you rely so much on that, by definition, or rather often by inadvertently, you will lose focus on how you develop your own capability inside your own country, right? In indigenous capability. So I
reducing foreign investment and embracing indigenous technology.
Not reducing foreign investment, reducing our dependency and our mindset that FDI is everything. I think when I was a kid, and even before that, FDI was seen as one of the big measures about how well an economy is doing. If the question just now was how do we compete with others, I think because we no longer have the low cost base that we did in the 80s and 90s, because we're no longer so special in the sense that we can speak English fairly well, because other countries are catching up, already caught up on that score. So the competitiveness of Malaysia to attract FDI can build, but why rely on that? When I think a more radical approach is to think of what can be invested internally, domestic investment by government. Government's role huge here, to ensure that our own capacity can speak for itself.
All right, thank you for that. The another live question from Siti Zaleha for Firdaus. What are the policy changes that you believe will help women when it comes to equal opportunities?
Sure, thank you. One I mentioned earlier would be the sexual harassment bill. I really don't see the reason why are we still forestalling on that. Let's speed up that process. So that's one. And then second, there's a whole host of debate about quality versus quantity. Should political parties, for example, set a quota? And initially, to be honest, I actually did not see much reason for that until somebody explained to me, look, when you organize a forum, people would subconsciously gravitate towards the possible male speakers as opposed to women. And when someone pointed out, someone would say, as long as you have a woman, female moderator, that's okay. What? That's a whole of mindset issues, and this is what we do. What we need to emphasize when we look at our law and policy, and sexual harassment bill being one of it. Because when we talk about the relation between law and society, yes, law must reflect the reality of our society, but it shouldn't stop there. Law must be transformative as to what kind of society that we want. And so the sexual harassment bill would go a long way towards transforming the society that we want, towards eliminating that hidden barriers that we want. So at the moment, we have, I think the Ministry of Human Resources have the code of conduct when it comes to sexual harassment, but these are dependent on whether or not businesses would want to incorporate that or not. But if we are serious, that should be made into law, and all other policies supporting women at the workplace should also be looked at, not just by government but also businesses. Yeah, thank you.
Well, law being transformative, that's a really good point. Next question live, Timothy asks, what are your thoughts on freedom of expression in media, and should we take action on amending the censorship laws or media laws that we have today? Syed Saddiq, would you care to comment? Freedom of expression.
I'm a big supporter of freedom of expression, not just in the media, but also among individuals. That's why we pursued for the abolishment of the Sedition Act, or at least to put a halt while coming up with a more comprehensive replacement, which is a moratorium. But for the media, I remember we were planning to set up an independent media council made up of media from the left, right, center to ensure that there's greater accountability, transparency, and for democratic norms to flourish in Malaysia. So few ways to move forward here. One is I agree on reviewing laws on censorship, whether it's in the formal or informal media. You don't just look at our ability to report, but also look at our arts industry, for example, where there's still some level of censorship. Look at how great arts group like Punk Rock Sulap of Sabah, who had their art censored previously because they were very critical of government in the way in which they depict their arts. Look at how, for example, FINAS operates, which I believe could still be much better if we're able to allow for greater independence in artistic and creative expression. I think this all ties back together, right? And also ties back, I mean, if we go on the more formal sector, again, we need to ensure that we cultivate a greater culture in investigative journalism, so that there will be greater transparency and accountability, not just within the democratic sphere, but also within the private sphere. So I think all ties back to one common message, that freedom of expression is integral in defining Malaysia's DNA, in allowing for Malaysian democracy to flourish to the greatest extent, because I believe with that, it also means empowering the people and the rakyat and decentralizing power by the hands of the few, and from the hands of the few.
All right, thank you. I like that you brought up art as well. Let's not forget about expression in a form of art. Next question we have Umar, Farhan, and Krishan, among many other people who ask question on race. How do you see race-based politics impact the younger generation? And is there a need to transition away from tribal and race-based politics? Shahril will give you that question.
Yeah, I always get asked a version of this. I will say very quickly again what I said earlier. How does it impact young people? You gotta ask yourself, who are we talking about when we talk about young people? There are, whether you like it or not, still many young people whose identity, whose primary identity that they ascribe to, is a racial one. Whatever you feel about that, that is the situation that I think is real in Malaysia at this point. That said, the second part of the question is there a need to move away, transition? I gave a fairly long-winded philosophical answer in a previous forum with Saddiq was on as well. I'm not going to repeat that. But what I will say is this. There is definitely space and a need to reduce the belligerence and the tension when you speak of identity politics. First, some people think you can fight identity politics. Some of us choose to accept that it is a reality of our time. That is a first order question which one has to ask oneself. Do you feel that you want to spend your time in youth activism or in politics fighting identity politics, or working around it or working with it to ensure that it is not so pointed? So once you've made that choice, then you go down each individual path that you do. In my case, I think without me explaining so much, it's quite clear. I've chosen the latter, right? Because I'm in a race-based party. Just because I'm in a race-based party doesn't mean that I'm off the hook. If anything, I'm more on the hook to ensure that when I speak or whenever I can influence how my party speaks, it should not be pointed, or it should not be in a way that that is incendiary. So is there room to reduce the tension, to reduce the belligerence? Absolutely. So the responsibility is on public figures like myself and others to ensure that if I have to speak of identity politics or from a place of identity politics, I do it in a way that's responsible. So there's that part of the individual responsibility that all of us hold. Other things that I think can be more tangible or more legislative. I'm a fan of legislating against hate speech, which will cut across all sorts of discrimination, right? But in this particular sense, racial or ethnic based hate speech, I think will go a long way, as in legislating against that. So I'm a fan of that. There were, over the past 5-10 years, there have been tentative steps towards it, but we've never seen it come to fruition. I'd like to see that change, because I think once you have those laws, you will find attitudes and behaviors hopefully change. You cannot immediately change prejudices, but at least you can control how those prejudices are expressed in the public sphere, because those expression in the public will influence future generations. So as much as you can't control how people feel, I think there is space for government to control what is said and what is publicly expressed in the public sphere. If it incites hatred, hatred, especially on grounds of ethnicity, then government ought to control it. So those are my two examples of what we can do: individual responsibility and a particular case of legislation.
I think that was a very insightful response. I took away reducing tension and also focusing on addressing hate speech. Right. So we have, with the interest of time, we'll give Firdaus this question. Bukri asks, how do we bring up topics to youth to care about particularly local issues that may not necessarily be trending on Twitter, on social media and whatnot? How do we bring light local issues or surface local issues that may not be trending on social media?
I see. Okay. I wanted to say, if Twitter doesn't work, you can try TikTok or some other application. But anyway, jokes aside, here's the thing. I think we should give our youth a bit more credit. And I'll tell you why. This is a not so recent press report that I read that past VP admits that it's a challenge maintaining support from youth, because youth, as compared to voters from the older days, who are more prone to staying loyal with the parties come what may, youth today look at issues before they decide whether or not they want to support a particular political party. To me, that's an indication that change is happening. It is slow, but change is happening, and political parties must catch up to that youth looks at issues and not so much about blind loyalty and allegiance to parties. And also this ties in with the earlier points on race-based parties. In Malaysia, race and religion are very much tied together. And so to me, there is already this appetite for youth to look into these issues, to work into these issues. But as I mentioned earlier, they know they want to do something about it, but they may not necessarily have the tool to go about it. And this is where the civil society can come into the picture. But the other way would be to recognize that youth also have a voice, and that should not be invalidated. Very quickly, another point I would like to add, and I want to take this opportunity, is for us to continue the call for AUKU to be abolished. And that's the Akta University and College University. Akta University and College University, because to me, it's ironic that we hear our political leaders, our business leaders lamenting about the quality of our students when we have AUKU in the first place that seeks to regulate their activity, when we have AUKU which creates an environment in which analytical thinking, critical thinking, the ability for someone to take a position and defend that position, those things are not celebrated because we have AUKU in the first place. So to me, do away with that. And then we can talk about having more youth in politics. And then very quickly, politicking and politics have to be a differentiation. I'm hearing too many youth saying that, you know what, looking at what's happening right now, I don't want to know, I don't want to bother, it doesn't concern me because what's the point? But to me, when
Right.
we care about those issues, those are politics. It doesn't necessarily mean politicking. And so let's make that distinction. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Firdaus, for the very strong action that I believe we can all take away for today's session. As we approach the final minutes of the forum, I want to give a big thanks to our speaker today, YB Syed Saddiq, Shahril, and Firdaus. Your participation means so much for this organization and also help us move the discourse forward. I wish we had more time. I would love to have you all come back in the short future. I would also like to thank the Chevening Alumni Committee for making this happen. The real work is done in the background. If you'd like to know, if you'd like to learn more about what we do, the links are down below. Lastly, I want to thank the real winners of tonight, all of you who have tuned in for your active participation and your excellent questions. On behalf of Chevening Alumni Malaysia, I wish you safe and healthy as we continue to fight the last stretch of pandemic together. I now hand the session back to our President Zaim for the closing.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Shahril. Thank you, Firdaus, and thank you, YB Saddiq. I think that was a very engaging session, very insightful. I think we covered many grounds today, and I look forward to having more discussions like this in the future. And for people watching on Facebook, thank you so much for being all the way. It was good, over 100 people, for 90 minutes. Good session. Keep an eye out for our page, social media. It's all at Chevening MY, and we'll be having another forum next month on interfaith dialogue. So there should be something interesting. And keep an eye out and stay safe. Thank you, and enjoy the holiday seasons coming up, and have a great year. Have a good year coming up. So thanks, guys, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks, John, and thanks everyone on the panel.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.